a very special show for you. We're at the National Packard Museum here in Warren, Ohio, and a special guest, Larry Ward from the Two-Wheel Power Hour from WKBN AM.
That's right, 570 WKBN, Two-Wheel Power Hour. We're on every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. Can't thank Rick and Greg and all of you enough for having us out here to talk about the motorcycle exhibit.
How long have you been doing that show now?
Well, the show has been on since January of 2000, and we had gone through one or two different hosts, and for a variety of reasons, the travel or didn't want to stay late at night or whatever, it finally came. I was a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, putting together the promotions, the Daytona Bike Week, selling the commercials, and for whatever reason, Dan Rivers came to me one day and he said, you know, instead of getting another host, why don't you try it? And I said, Dan, I can go home at 5. I don't have to stay till 7. So Dan says, oh, just for a little while, try it. And that little while has began since 2012. It's now 2002, now 2018. So it's been about a 16-year run.
Great.
The oldest, longest running, and the #1 motorcycle show in the state of Ohio.
Great. That signal goes forever too. Like Pittsburgh to
Boom.
Cleveland. Oh yeah, it's all over the place.
Oh yeah,
It's
nothing
all
wrong with
over
having
the
a big
place.
stick, brother.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we got a great show lined up for you today, and I think Larry knows a little bit about motorcycles. I know very little, so let's go check it out. With me, I have the Executive Director of the National Packard Museum, Marianne Horenchek.
Correct.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very good. We got a special show lined up here today, and what's
very
going on
exciting.
here?
Well, we have our annual antique motorcycle exhibit. We're featuring the motor. So we have 30 motorcycles here of a lot of vintages. We have 11 different engines separated from the motorcycle itself. So it's a totally new look at the motorcycle engine. So, you know, usually we feature the models,
Right.
you know, we've had a lot of different themes over the years, but this time we just singled out the engine. It's very fascinating.
As we'll see in the show, you got some very old ones in here.
Yes, we do.
And we have, what, a 1902 engine here?
Yes.
And, oh, God, it goes all the way up to the 60s and 70s.
We have some originals and some restored. Beautiful machines.
So how do you organize something like this? I know every year you have something different, right?
Right.
With motorcycles.
Well, my part is usually just making sense out of the crazy in this thing. The motorcycle committee gets together and they sit around the table and they come up with, and there's usually an underlying discussion, and we come up with a theme and then they run with it. I have very little to do with what motorcycles come in here.
Right.
That's all the committee, because they're motorcycle guys, they're passionate about it. They know where the motorcycles are and where to find them and how to
Right.
convince the guys to put them on loan here. Actually, that's gotten a lot easier. This is our 18th annual motorcycle
Oh, wow.
exhibit.
So every
the
year it's
first
something
couple of
different,
years,
yeah.
it was a little rough getting these guys to agree, but now we have a waiting list.
When do you show the motorcycles from? Is there a
January
certain...
through May. Yeah,
January
we don't go into riding season. Right around Memorial Day, this closes down. It's May 27th this year. It ends with a meeting of the Lake Erie chapter, the Antique Motorcycle Club of America. So it goes January through May, and we get a lot of clubs coming in, but we end it before riding season.
It's got a nice display here, I'll tell you. I can't wait to dive into them.
There's a lot of good stuff.
What do you think, Claire, huh?
I think it's absolutely fantastic. You know, for 18 years, it has been the jewel of the valley for motorcyclists, where we can come in here the first week of January and we can stay and hang out all the way through the end of May. We can see some motorcycles that are on loan that are absolutely fantastic. As the host of Two-Wheel Power Hour, I enjoy being out here and want to thank Rick and Marianne for allowing us to be a part of this.
I'm looking forward to the Flying Merkle.
Yeah.
The Flying Merkle.
Flying Merkle.
There's some unique bikes out there, and I think when we talk about the motors in a few minutes, I think there's a little bit of history behind 2 or 3 of them that I'd like to share with you.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
And
Mary-
people can come here and visit this
Right, I was
Tuesday
gonna
through
say-
Saturday.
Okay, go ahead.
Noon to 5, Sunday
Okay.
1 to 5, and we're only closed on Mondays and holidays. So
Okay, we got a website?
we do. National at packardmuseum.org is our email, and packardmuseum.org is our website. So you can check us out on
we
the
have
web.
motorcycles, we have
We have cars. We
How
have
many,
beautiful
how many cars
cars.
do you have in here?
I think we have 27 cars on
27.
display.
And
presently.
26 after I leave. I'm taking the black one over here.
Hey, good luck with that. You have to push me out of the seat first. That's a beauty.
That's probably 300 grand or more.
It's up there. It's up there.
It's
Yeah,
a
we have
beauty.
some great
It's a beauty.
artifacts here. And Larry, you've been here a lot of times.
Well, you know,
We've had to pry his fingers off the steering wheel a time or two.
I've been fortunate enough to not only be a media person to promote this jewel in the valley, the National Packard Museum, but a few years ago I set the record at the Lake Erie Loop for the 50cc class, and I was actually an exhibitor a few years ago, and we were proud to be able to raise through the Packard $4,000 for aluminum cans for burned children to send 30 burned kids to Camp Fitch that year.
It's great. Yeah, and that was
Absolutely.
a great motorcycle too. Great story.
It was, yeah. I was
was a
stupid enough
great
to ride
story.
around Lake Erie at it 24 hours and 3 minutes, and not that somebody couldn't break it, but I don't think anybody is stupid enough to want to do it. So.
Here we are with the motors right now, and we're going to talk about the 1951 Harley-Davidson G Cervicar motor. What do you know about that, man?
Well, what's unique about the Cervicar motor, it is one of the engines that helped Harley-Davidson create the image that motorcycles can be used for a lot of different things. Back in 1929, when we started to get into the Great Depression, you could buy a used Ford for $50. So that made motorcycling a very expensive proposition. So Harley-Davidson created the Cervicar and used the flathead motor to power it. The flathead motor, its distinction is that the valves sit in the cylinder right beside the piston rather than in the head like it is commonplace nowadays. It's a very dependable motor, it's durable, torquey, it's like a pedestrian kind of motor. It wasn't really known for its high-speed endeavors and that, like the next motor we'll talk about.
And how many years, you know, they use this?
This particular motor, they ran from 1931 all the way up through, I believe, 1954.
Here, Larry, here's a real famous one. I'm sure you know every nook and cranny on this one. This is the Knucklehead. This is a famous motor by Harley-Davidson. I think this is the one that really made them excel.
The Knucklehead motor is revered by many. It is revered because it put Harley-Davidson into the high-performance speed world. The Knucklehead has overhead valve, and it's called a Knucklehead because you see these 4 bolts that secure the head? Those 4 bolts resemble knuckles, and so that's why they called it a Knucklehead. This particular motor set the land speed record of 123 miles an hour, and I believe that was done in 1932. That particular motor has powered Harley-Davidson all the way up till we got to the panhead here, and we'll see one of those a little later on. This is truly a game changer for Harley-Davidson. It set them apart from the entire field.
Right.
It helped set speed records, and it helped to sell Harley-Davidson.
Sure did. They were having a hard time at that time. And that was right around
they
War
they
II.
all were, but as Harley goes in the industry, it seems like that's how everybody goes.
Right, right. As I understand, this one was, the Knucklehead was built like in 36, and it went through...
1936, and I believe the Packard has a 47 EL in the back that we'll take a look at a little later on. So you can see how this motor sits in a modern chassis. We're talking a tubular frame chassis, and you can see from the type of brakes and the suspension that is on that, that bike is built for touring and for speed.
You see a lot of the hot rodders, or not the hot, like choppers and everything, they love these, the old timers, yeah.
These are like gold.
Yeah.
When you start to find out how much that bike in the back room costs, you're going to be like,
Yo. So according to history, this thing here is, they started them in 36, and they built them till 47. Last year, the Knucklehead was in 47.
Absolutely.
But you'll find them.
And like I said, it was a game changer for Harley-Davidson. You can see that the little Philister head screws, it's just a unique down. Here's your points and your distributor, your linkered carburetor. You can see how the oiling system now, it's as modern as it could be in 1936.
Now we're standing in front of a 1974 Ducati 750 twin motor.
The 750 twin motor is what many consider in the Ducati world the holy grail of Ducatis. It is called the L design, and that's because you can see the configuration of the cylinders, and it has desmodromic valves.
What?
Desmodromic valves, and that's Ducati's term for how they actuate the valves. In a normal engine, overhead valve engine, Rick, you have the valve sitting here, then there's a valve stem, and then there's a spring. And then there's a little finger we call the cam faller that moves it up and down. When it moves it up, it compresses the spring, and through timing it is either drawing in fuel or exhausting gas. All right, once it goes through that cycle and it comes off the cam, that push rod now comes back down and the spring relieves, okay? So it's like that.
Yes.
The good about that is it's an easy way to build a motor. It's efficient. There is a drawback though. There's a finite RPM per given motor configuration. So if the engineers say that this motor brings its peak horsepower and torque at 7,000 RPM, so if you go past that, you actually lose a little power. If you go way past that, then you get a thing called valve float. And that's when you can break the motor. Valve float means that the motor, the mechanicals of the motor are going faster than the springs can keep up, and they collapse.
Okay.
And when they collapse, either a valve stays open or it stays closed. Can't get the fuel in or out. And if it stays open and a piston hits it, then good night, Irene, race over.
Right.
The nice thing about this is if you take fingers like this and you put your valve in the center, one finger lifts the valve open, the other finger closes the valve.
Right.
Now think about that. Now that's high tech. This motor's been around since the 70s. That's very high tech for that era, but you don't have valve float. This is truly a racing motor. And Cook Nielsen in 1977 powered this similar motor, a 750 SS, to the Daytona 200 win. And I believe that was Ducati's only win. I've met Cook before and just loves it. They call it Old Blue.
Old Blue, okay. This is an Italian-built motor.
Absolutely.
And they're still around, right? But they were focused basically on race bikes, right? Ducati.
Well, no. Ducati has just like Harley Davidson, a lifestyle.
Okay.
And when you're in that lifestyle, I mean, it's the most vibrant red colors, you know, Italians, and then they're attending all the races. But those bikes, they have a touring model and they have an off-road
I was familiar with the
model.
race bikes only, yeah.
But their claim to fame is, we like to win.
Right.
You know, we're just like the Ferraris. We like to win.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll tell you what, they've done a great job. This year, I just read recently in Road Racing World magazine that the Panigale, which is their top-end bike that you can ride on the street, but you can race on the track.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
It is a winner now, right out of the box. So they have improved that. And now they're not using desmodromic valve system. This was circa the 70s. They're using a different type of system, but they're very unique and innovative, and they've got the Ducatis in World Superbike now, and also in MotoGP, right up into the top 5 in every race. And that's a huge achievement when you consider they're racing against Japanese motorcycles that have multiple cylinders, where the Ducatis have 2.
They still Italian-built Ducatis?
Yes,
Are they?
absolutely.
We're standing in front of a 1968 Puch cutaway motor, they call it here, just because it's all ripped apart. And it's an Austrian-made motor. It's a split single, two-stroke.
It's a single-cylinder 250C motorcycle, but its claim to fame is that it uses a single crank pin, 2 connecting rods, 2 pistons, single cylinder, and both pistons move up and down inside a single cylinder rather than 2 cylinders. That was done for economy as a manufacturing process, but it has also some unique things that separate it from a lot of the other 2-strokes, and that is how you get gas into the cylinder. They induct gas into the cylinder through the bottom of the cylinder, case induction. So it's a much more refined way. Instead of bringing it in clear up here, goes on top of the piston pulls it down, goes into the crankcase, pressurizes it, and then goes back up. This thing direct feeds right into the top of the piston at the bottom of the stroke. So from a performance standpoint, it's superior, but this particular motorcycle has never been known to be a performance motorcycle. It is a utilitarian type of vehicle in Austria. It is like the Ford Model T. It was used for a lot of different things, and not too many of them that I can recall were racing. More of a pedestrian use. They're very, very dependable. You mix gas and oil, and probably in a 20 or 25 to 1 ratio, which meant there's an awful lot of oil. Nowadays, when you're pre-mixing two strokes, they're at 50, 60, sometimes 100 to 1. So when you're at 20 or 25 to 1, you're pouring almost a quart into 4 gallons of gas. So it needed that because of the way of the lubrication system and how to lubricate the bearings in that. But this particular design, and in a Puch motorcycle, they're now starting to command a lot more money. Puch was not only known for this, Rick, but Puch was known for their mopeds. They have if you follow the Moped Army, which is a forum devoted to everything mopeding since the early 70s. Those are highly desirable, the Puch mopeds. And they make a model called the E50, which is a single cylinder, single speed. And I've seen kids port them and polish them and expansion chambers and carburetors and can get that thing up to about 60, 65 miles an hour, about 8 horse out of a 50cc motor.
Because they're usually about, what, 5 horse or something like that? Not even
that?
that?
1 to 1.5 horse.
Oh, that's it?
Max.
Oh, okay.
2 horse max if you get the Puch Maxi or something like that. But this particular motorcycle was affordable. You'd see a lot of people taking trips on these motorcycles. So they were used everything from touring to riding through the fields.
Affordable and dependable, huh?
Very good.
What we got here is a very famous one. If you ever watch the Pickers, you ever watch American Pickers?
Occasionally.
Yeah, and Chasing Classic Cars, Wayne Carini. Well, they picked up a couple of these and with the bike and everything, the Flying Merkel. Okay, this is the motor for it. This is the light, the Merkel Light. This is a 1914 version of it. Flying Merkel come around in 1903. And they started out as Merkel Light, and then they went to Flying Merkel a little later on.
Right.
And they were a famous race bike.
Well, this particular motor is kind of unique. It's roughly can go up to 316 cc's, but it has what they call a total oil loss system on it. So in other words, you have the exposed valve springs. Again, it is a flathead design where the valve is in the cylinder, and everything is exposed. So when we say total loss, you're going to put oil into it, and when you get done riding, you got to check the oil can.
So the
again.
oil flows through here all the time then?
Yeah,
huh?
and up in here, yeah.
So that was very sloppy then.
Well, it was 1911, 1915. You know, a lot of these innovations came rapidly in like just a short 20-year period.
Right.
We went from a motor like this to a Cervicar motor, then up in to the knucklehead. So in the 30s. So in just a span of 10, 15, 20 years, dramatic improvements. But these are what they began, and they're highly prized, expensive, can't find them. It's what we'd rather call this the unobtainium motor.
The unobtainium.
Unobtainium.
Okay. Yeah. And hey, look, it was built in Middletown, Ohio.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And and this is on loan from Bruce Lindsay from Chagrin Falls.
Heck of a collection, huh?
Yes. Fantastic. I mean, it's so great to have this type of stuff, because this is something where I can bring my grandson, who's 5 or 6,
Yeah.
as I start to educate him into motorcycling like it did my sons. This is an opportunity for me to show him history, and in a way that is easy for him to see it. There's not big maddening crowds and stuff, you know. So the Packard Museum is truly, I always say it's the gem of the valley. You know, there's somewhere where you can see the Packard history, which was glorious. And from January through May, each and every year for the past 18 years, Rick, you can see the motorcycle exhibits.
This is a big history lesson for me too. You're teaching my new teacher, Larry.
Yeah, thanks.
This is a very interesting one. A 1909 Pierce motor made in Buffalo, New York. It's a inline 4-cylinder. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it was a car engine, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, you're right, Rick, it was. But I think the claim to fame about installing, as early as this, a 4-cylinder motorcycle in a a 4-cylinder into a motorcycle, is that each one of these cylinders have a power pulse, and the crankshaft power, the way it's situated in that, they offset each other. So you don't need balancer shafts and that. So this particular motor was called vibrationless in its advertising. So if you were a motorcyclist and you didn't like your handlebars shaking, a lot of bikes were rigid frames back in that era.
Right.
You know, everything, you got to be rough and tough. And you can imagine what the roads were like too. So to have something that's vibrationless is like leaping way ahead.
Right.
And now you get your gal on the bike, you know, there's no shaking all over the place and that. Also, when things don't shake, they don't vibrate. They don't vibrate means they don't lose parts.
Right.
And I can tell you that as a guy that runs some different bikes that loses parts, you can take your wrenches with you and you take some Loctite.
The old
But this
Harleys were like that.
this heralded in the era of vibrationless, and to this day, there are still 4-cylinder motorcycles, and their claim to fame is the same exact thing. Smooth as silk. Can hardly see it running. You got to put your ear on it or look at the tack.
Right here we have a 1909 Royal Pioneer. It's a, T-head 4-stroke.
Rick, you can see from this particular bike how a lot of the motorcycle manufacturers incorporated bicycling into their motorcycling, and how some of the innovations from yesteryear are incorporated into the bikes of today. One of the yesteryear types of things is how we rode a motorcycle at night, how we lit them up. And you can see that this is like a kerosene lantern with a prism. Here's the reservoir for the kerosene. And this is how they lit things. You didn't really go fast at night because you couldn't see very far, like maybe a couple feet in front of you. But you'll notice that it has, if you look down on the front here, it has a hub very similar to a bicycle. And it's probably 36 spokes, and it's, you know, a bicycle type of rim. It's not anything special about it. As we come up here, one of the things I always want to point out on these older models, they're handmade. Today, when your guys are building choppers, one of the biggest things is we don't want to see anything on the handlebars. I'd like to point out, Rick, how they have integral cables running through the handlebars way back in 1909.
1909, yeah.
So look at how clean this whole front end looks on this bike. This is a beautiful motorcycle.
Yes, it is.
The throttle and the controls in that are, you can't see them. You turn them up here, they're all here. It's just a clean look.
I love the way they come back.
Look at the hand-formed tank. This is not only a gas tank, this is an oil tank. And this is a primer to pressurize it.
When would you pressurize it?
Before the start.
Before the start.
Or as you're starting, you want to, I'd probably do it before. I've never ridden one, but I would assume I'd want to pressurize and get the oil because it's a total loss system. So you don't want to start the bike up dry with no oil. So you'd want to pressurize it first. Of course, my good friend Bruce Williams, he would be able to tell you exactly where every nut and bolt on this bike probably was made. But suffice, he's not here, so I'm giving you the best I can on it. One of the other things, if you'll notice, the exhaust pipe now forms the frame.
Let me ask you something here. This
Sure.
is this right here. Is that a primer?
That particular thing there, I'm not sure, Rick, if that's a primer or if that is to leave the pressure off when you're pedaling.
Oh, okay. Well,
Because you have to pedal start this
oh,
bike.
this is a pedal start. Okay.
And pedal starting the bike, I think it's a little easier to pedal start it with a pressure release there.
Okay.
And then, that's what my thoughts are on
pressure
that.
release. Okay.
Also, when you come back, you'll notice that this is one of the earliest manufacturers of a different type of a belt drive. This is little pieces of leather overlapped on each other, and they are riveted together. Rivets are very common.
You wouldn't
back
think
in the
that
day.
would be very smooth, you know?
Well, it's not. You can see that the belt is stepped on the bottom. So it's like,
Yeah.
where that particular bike over there has got a smooth, flat leather belt. And when we come back here, you can see how, when you look at bikes today, they got little sprockets here, little sprockets there. Look at the massive sprocket on the back. You see how big it is? But if you look over here, you notice what this is right here? This to me
bicycle
looks
brake.
like a bicycle coaster brake.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you step on the pedals, this coaster brake works, and it's just the innovations that they put from bicycles have been around since the 1800s, far predated motorcycles. But a lot of the stuff that they were able to use, because these are not extremely heavy, they're not as powerful as modern motorcycles, so you can get away with some of these, the usage of some bicycle components.
Right.
But one of the things that always amazes me is the absolute beauty of the craftsmanship, the hand-formed tank. The handlebars, you can see how they're stepped and formed. Just a gorgeous bike.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. A 1909 Royal Pioneer. What we have here, we have a 1902 Sylvester and Jones. Okay, this is probably the oldest motor and bike we have in the museum right now. Probably one of the oldest motorcycles there are, really, 1902. And what they're featuring is the motor on this, the Sylvester and Jones. Look how much this one looks like a bicycle, Larry. How you talk about the Royal Pioneer looking like a bicycle. Look at this one here. The handlebars and everything. It's just.
Well, Rick, these are custom-built motorcycles. And again, a lot of the stuff, you can see that they're double-butted spokes, and they have a hub, and it has a little oiler in the center of the hub there. That's kind of marketed or taken from bicycles. This particular thing is an early example of what we call a girder type front suspension.
Okay.
Surprisingly, they used girder suspensions with springs on choppers in the 60s and early 70s. This particular thing, again, just the aesthetic beauty of this motorcycle. From the beautifully, I call mustache handlebars, the contoured leather grips with cork ends, the absolutely polished custom gas tank. They even use seats. This looks similar to a Brooks seat. If you're familiar with Brooks out of Great Britain, they manufacture the world's leading leather seats for bicycles. And this is a very remnant style. Again, it's a total loss system, but it has some unique things built into it. Again, a flat belt drive. Unlike the other motorcycle we talked about, this particular belt drive should be a lot smoother. Although I don't know about this belt drive because it doesn't have any grip like a modern belt. When you're in like rain or you get a lot of wet on the belt net, I don't know, I think it would slip a lot. So I think this particular bike would probably be used more for a sunny day ride rather than being stuck out in the rain. I think you'd have some problems with that.
I notice it's chain drive over here. Both these, the Royal Pioneer and this one also has a chain drive. Is that for starting it?
Well, it's not only for starting it, but it's a dual mode. So if something should happen, you could actually pedal it.
Okay.
So that's why
So
it's
you would
driven like that.
You would use the chain instead of the
Yes.
the belt there. Okay.
Yes, and again, in order to get it started, you got to pedal it to get it going.
Okay.
And it's a fantastic example. It's a one-of. We don't know of any others in America. And of course, it's absolutely beautiful, as all the bikes,
Right.
and it's got a great history.
Okay, what we have here, looks like a British bike, really, BSA or something, but it's a 1936 Zundap. It's a model KS 500 cc's, made in Germany. And
You know, Rick, it's funny because you look at this bike and you think BMW because it's got the opposed cylinders. But this was the beginning of the buildup in Germany right before World War II. This 1936 Zundap is an innovative model, and we'll go through some of the things. First and foremost, it's got a large headlight to illuminate the road. It has an odometer and a speedometer built into it.
this must be one of the first, I would say. Yeah.
One of the very first.
Yeah.
And then with the switch gear here to turn the headlight on and off. But you can see it's all heavy duty, built right up for World War II. The other thing is, like that bike that we showed you over there, that motorcycle there, it has a true girder front suspension. Now, a girder suspension incorporates the axle coming up and pivoting off of these springs. One of the things you'll notice is that this entire suspension system is full of grease fittings. If you keep this bike greased, it will perform to its specifications for a lifetime. Also, in addition to the girder front suspension, which is state-of-the-art back then, it also had a dampening device. So in other words, when you're riding in rough terrain and that, you don't want that handlebars to be real loose, because you hit something, it could jerk it out of your hands. So what you do is you tighten the lever down, and it tightens, it puts pressure on the bearings and that, so you can go from really easy to it's stiffer to turn. And when they're using these bikes in the deserts and areas that they needed to run them in during World War II, having a suspension and having the adjustability of this bike is everything.
That's neat. That's a neat feature there.
One of the other things you'll notice is its choke up on the handlebar. It has bar end levers. So you've got a clutch and a brake here. This is the brake, that's the clutch over there. This particular model has front brake, clutch, and then right here you can see it's very easy for him to take his foot off the peg, put his heel on that. Most of your braking's done on the front end anyways. Where it helps is when you have a passenger on the back, then it helps to have both brakes working really well.
This is an interesting system here, huh?
It is. And this particular thing is a spring-loaded device, so that if your passenger is heavier and you don't want them bottoming out, you tighten up the compression on the spring here. If your passenger is lighter, you don't want her being jarred, so you loosen this up here. Some of the innovations, the opposed cylinder is an economical design in that they balance each other out. Modern Subarus have that type. It's called a pancake motor or opposed twin. BMWs and Marushu, a Japanese motorcycle, also had this design. It's very economical. It's not a high RPM motor, but it is a motor that will be dependable for years and years and years. And it is a motor that has an awful lot of torque.
And
when you go to shift this bike, it's
suicide.
Unlike having a brake or a foot peg to do the shifting, you now shift here. So you pull in the clutch.
How long has suicide shifting been around? Has it been around forever? Or
Harley Davidson made that popular.
Oh, they made it in the early 1900s then?
No, I think their suicide shifts that I remember were on the 50s on the pan heads and some of the earlier knuckles.
But this must be one of the first.
It was. This
Real
particular bike, yeah, it was. And you can see that here's the shifter, so you put it into gear, throttle it, go to take off, pull in the clutch, push it down for the next gear, and get going. I mean, it's pretty simple. So whether you actuate the gearbox through a hand lever or a foot lever, it's the same thing. And I wouldn't mind riding a bike with that. You'll also know one more very important invention on this bike, and also with BMWs, is that here's the gearbox, and here's the drive shaft. The drive shaft allows you to have minimal maintenance and repairs. When you're talking about a bike that has a chain drive, you've got a primary sprocket in the front, and then you've got a rear sprocket, and then you've got chains. And then you've got some device to not only have the chain follow over it like a phenolic block, but you'll have adjusters in the back. That's important to keep it constantly adjusted, and also important to keep it oiled. The beauty of this is you can take it out and ride it on a Sunday in a rainstorm and come back out on a Monday. You don't have to oil the chain, you don't have to clean it, you don't have to do anything. You just got to keep the gearbox and the rear differential like a car, make sure the oil level stays the same, and you're good to go. No fuss, no muss, ride the bike.
What we have here is a 1949 Harley Panhead, which we were just talking about, the second year of the Panhead.
One of the most sought after Harley-Davidson motorcycles out there. Right behind the knucklehead is the Panhead. And the Panheads are, the reason why they say it is it looks like it's an aluminum pie pan that sits on top of the cylinder that covers the rocker arms. That's why it's called a Panhead. And I gotta tell you, it is endearing to many of the Harley-Davidson motorcyclists. The Panhead was the motor and the chopper used in Easy Rider, if you remember that, with Peter Fonda.
He's the one that made the Panhead popular, world famous.
Yeah, and it has a long history. It is very sought after. It's got a unique design. And again, many things that are old are still new. And if you go through the front of the bike from the chrome trimmed accessories on the fender and that, you can see a lot of the styling things from the old bikes are still in the new bikes. You know, the headlight, the internal wiring on the handlebars. You have a dampener system now that uses a knob instead of a T-handle. You've got your gauges right on top where you can see them very easily. Again, this is a generator system, not an alternator system, and it's 6 volts, so you have generator, and then if you lose oil pressure, these are called idiot lights. We'd prefer to have gauges because they really do tell you. By the time an oil light comes on, you got a problem that you may not be able to fix, but you certainly have to stop right away. The other nice thing about it is got the chrome guards in case the bike goes over. We talked about the rat trap clutch actuation mechanism. This bike employs it with a 4-speed suicide shifter. And again, nothing better than having your girl behind you on a seat like this, because she's going to be hugging onto you.
And comfortable too.
Absolutely. You can see these are the pegs for her.
Yeah. This thing's all chromed out, huh? Boy,
very much so.
This is a
beautiful bike.
Beauty.
And you can see how, you know, they back in the day where they'd have racks on the back, they'd have racks down at the bottom, racks on the rear fender. So, you know, it's a lifestyle. It's anything that you want your bike to be from a personalized standpoint. You can do and make it what you want it to be.
How much do you think something like this would go for back in '49?
I can tell you what I think it'll go for now.
Yeah, probably about 10 times that price, whatever it was.
Yeah, you know what?
Was this a couple $1,000 bike, or if that?
You know, in 1947, you know, I would probably say, you know, it's probably maybe $2,000, something like that. You'd have to get an expert like Bruce on it. But I can tell you, this bike in this condition now, I bet the owner wouldn't take $50,000 for it.
Yeah. What we have here is a 1978 Honda CBX 6-cylinder.
The really cool thing, Rick, about the Hondas, it's like when they went into IndyCar racing, their motto was, it's because we can do it. They were the first manufacturer, other than Benelli, to create for the mass public a 6-cylinder motorcycle. There's a worldwide club called the Honda CBX Forum. This particular iteration of the bike is turned into a cafe-style racer. So it has the same basic front end, but you can see how on this front end he's adapted different braking system to it. He has bobbed the front fender.
What do you mean by bobbing the front fender for people who don't know?
In other words, he has shortened the fender. Instead of the fender being a full-length fender, it's shortened here and here.
Okay.
So instead of it coming out another couple inches, they shorten up the fender.
Right.
It's called bobbing. You can look at the rear view mirrors. This is a style. This is a look of a cafe racer. So instead of your bars, your mirrors mounting up in here and then coming out here, which are like elephant ears, we call them,
Right.
they put them on the bar end so you can still see. It's required by law to have one mirror, but this gives it the cafe racer
So
look.
this bike wasn't bought like this. It was all custom.
This is a custom bike now.
Okay.
And the reason why is it's minimalistic on the front end. We've got to have a headlight for, you know, security reasons
Right.
and that. But you can see his ignition switch and his headlight switch, and that is it. You know, there's not a lot of things cluttering up the front end of the bike. The cafe racers want a bike that is simplistic looking and goes like hell.
This one looks like it does.
Yes, well, if you start to work your way back, you can see that he or somebody custom made and hand formed this aluminum gas tank.
This has got to be what, 5-6 gallon tank?
Oh, I think that's more like, yeah, at least 6 gallons.
That's a biggie.
This particular 6-cylinder motor incorporates flat side carburetors, which definitely give it an up on the performance angle. It is a 5-speed transmission. You can see that everything, the rear fender, the seat pan, all hand-formed aluminum, as is the custom seat. So it's a look. And the megaphones here, you can see he's got 3 pipes on this side.
3
and
on this
3
side,
on that
6 on
side.
them,
So
yeah.
it's very distinctive. And I'm going to tell you, if he would start this bike up, it's going to have a very distinctive howl to it.
How fast you think this one would go?
Well, I think if you want to lay down on the tank, I don't think you'd have any trouble getting it up to about 130.
130?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, it's got modern braking system, modern tires. So, you know, I think you could safely be at that speed too. And with the braking system,
Not me.
you're not going to have a problem of running out of room, so to speak.
I got my Harley up to 110 one time, and I was like, okay, that's fast enough.
Yeah, man, you're on the Ton Up Club.
What we got here is a 1947 Harley Knucklehead.
EL model.
I understand this guy still drives this thing. He puts a cover on the seat, and he just drives it like it is.
Well, that is the beauty of many of these old motorcycles. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we impressed upon everybody that comes here is that these motorcycles, a lot of them are hand-built, and they're built to last with minimum amount of maintenance. Now you got to remember, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the infrastructure wasn't as great. I think it wasn't until 32 that the Lincoln Highway Committee formed and tried to build a super highway that would go coast to coast, which became the Lincoln Highway. And then later on there was Route 66 and all of those iterations. But when you look at an older bike like this, I want to point out some of the just absolute cool features. And this is like getting to the tail end of the Knuckleheads. Well, this being a 1947 Knucklehead EL model. The coolness about this bike is that its durability. I told you that the Knucklehead ushered in the era of high performance. not only with the motor being an overhead valve, but also the type of suspension that was employed. And as we go to the front, I just want to point out some really cool things. You notice the patina on this bike is original. But 1947, and you still look at the steel. I mean, when you tap that thing,
It's like a tank.
yeah.
It's a biggie.
And you have the light up front to let people know that you're coming, very distinctive. You can take a look at the drum brakes and the hubs here. Again, we talk about a girder front suspension, where the springs are the suspension part. This thing pivots down here like this.
So this still isn't considered a Springer then?
Well, you could call it a Springer,
Okay.
but we call it a girder. That's the
Okay.
technical name
Because
for
I
it.
always thought these were the Springers where you could...
Yeah,
Okay.
and Rick, what'll happen is this thing pivots right here. So when you hit a bump, this thing pushes up, and it pushes and compresses the spring. And then when you go over the bump, it comes down. So that's your suspension, just like a shock absorber now. Some people think that the girder suspension, in all of its different iterations, modern ones too, that are one of the best suspensions going, you know, even to this day. The quality and the workmanship. This bike is a 47, and the owner still rides it to
Yeah,
this
still
day.
rides it, believe that?
Although you can see that back in the day, you know, we didn't have the sealing that we have nowadays. The machine surfaces aren't as nice as they are nowadays. So things leaked back then. You know, you'll see many of the older bikes, they always what we call marking their spot. And that's where they'll leave a little puddle.
That's what Harley
or
was saying it
something.
was for, right?
Absolutely. Well, a lot of bikes did that. And, you know, here's a points distributor. This is your voltage regulator. You can see that this is a knucklehead motor with the 4 prominent head bolts there that form the knuckle. Here is your oil tank. And you notice even to this day, we still have some part remnant of a bicycle.
Yeah.
Here's the, you know, you need a lot to get this thing
That's
moving
the Kickstarter
over.
there.
Yeah, there's no compression, so you got to go, you know. And here is one of the more famous things that they reproduce, what we call repopping now, and that's the toolkit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's probably hard to find one of those.
And if you were a guy
Yeah.
and you were dating a girl, one of the best motorcycles ever, because you sat right here and she hugged up next to you right there.
Oh, yikes,
There was no pillion on the back here. She sat
She was
right
right
there, and
there.
you were right there, and it was like right like that. A good thing. Boy.
Yes, it is.
You can notice the leather saddlebags, they still are in good working shape.
Yeah.
The exhaust pipes, the floorboards. Now, one of the things that are a little bit different, this is a floorboard, and this is now the rear brake.
Okay.
You remember the motorcycle out there, the rear
Right.
brake, he picked his foot up and stepped down on it? Well, this now is a forward motion. So your foot sits like that, and then you're like that.
Right.
Incorporated into the gas tank, and here's 2 openings for the gas tank. This actually splits in half. It's 2 pieces. It's made to look like one, but this bridge right here connects them together. And then on this one here, you got a speedometer, odometer, and easy to read speedometer.
Right.
You also have your switch, and here's your oil and generator lights. So you could tell if and it's a generator system.
This design's been around for quite a while. even
Oh
the
yeah,
newer
it's a
bikes,
mechanical speedometer,
Yeah, right.
and it's based on, and it's a finite science. It'll take the diameter of the tire, and you know, a couple of different things, and they compute it. And then it's probably a lot of Harley Davidsons were 2 to 1, so it'd make 2 revolutions there to 1 revolution there, kind of thing. So
You notice we got the suicide shift here?
absolutely, and if you notice, first gear here, neutral, second, third, and fourth. It is in fact a 4 speeds forward.
four-speed.
But the unique thing about that, because you had mentioned suicide on the other bike, but this particular bike is called a rat trap clutch. You have to step down here. It's spring loaded. You step down there, shift it into gear, rev up the throttle, and when you rev up the throttle, now you're letting instead of easing out the clutch on the modern bike, you're now easing out the clutch with your heel and your foot. So you learn to be pretty proficient pretty quick, or you're going to bounce it off something. So they standardized everything, including the marker lights, but this has a lot of accessories. Rear view mirror,
The rear horn? Is the horn accessory?
front fender brace there,
Okay.
marker lights there, the little headlight light there.
This here? Okay,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I noticed all that. Plus on the back here, we got some extra chrome on here.
Yeah, this is considered in its day a luggage rack, so you could
Okay.
put stuff on that. And you notice how heavy duty the fender stay is? Very solid. Everything about the bike screams built in America when everything was built to the max to last a lifetime.
have here is a 1952 concept car. It's called the Pan American Show Car. One of a kind.
One of a kind. And this was driven by what? The Packard family.
Packard family,
And
yeah.
you want to notice something. The styling cues of this car also, you notice this right here, kind of starting to look like somewhat of a Thunderbird styling. But they all kind of came to that styling back in the early 50s here. Look how long, this drop top will go back in, but the trunk's even big.
Yeah,
on
it's
this.
a huge one. The original cost of this car was $18,000. They only made one. This was a concept.
Could you imagine paying $18,000 back in the early 50s for a car? I mean, to transfer that, you're looking at a $150,000 car.
What we have here is a 1934 Packard Standard.
These are big cars, and again, people with the bucks bought these back when Packard. They bought them over Cadillac, Lincolns. You bought a Packard, and this is a long car.
Yes, it is.
A long car.
Long two-seater, but it's got a rumble seat in it too. So,
So you had your drop top, and you got an 8 in this. So
or they call those mother-in-law seats too.
Yeah.
We put the mother-in-law
yeah,
back
in the
there.
back.
Love the styling of the old Packards. Can't beat the 1930s style. It's the greatest.
Well, that's what started it all too.
Yeah. Standing in front of here is a 1936 Packard convertible 120B. You talk about a sexy car, huh? You talk about a sexy car. This is it here.
Yeah, this is it. This is a single guy that had a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
But you notice something back, they started to slant these grills back too to give it a more aerodynamic look. Got us a speed up there. And how much did this cost?
$1,100.
$1,100.
Yeah, $1,100 new.
New. And rumble seat, and as you see back there, it's even got a windscreen on the rumble seat. I mean, and it's not cheap stuff. It's heavy chrome, thick glass, and this was decked out one.
Oh yeah, yes, it's a decked out one, sure. This has 120 horsepower. It was it can go a maximum speed of 100 miles an hour.
Could you imagine
back in the 30s
going 100 miles an hour? Well, not on those tires. Can you imagine blowing the tire out on that?
No.
But from the looks of it, this came with this came with a lot of features. Ashtray, cigar lighter, you know,
heater.
and it came with a heater. A heater back in the 30s was a big deal back then because
air conditioning.
your air conditioner.
What we have here is by far the creme of the creme. A 1937 Packard.
This thing is professionally, obviously restored at this point, but smooth, and it's even the interior it's the wood in this, and it's just gorgeous.
This is the 1507 style V12 engine. What a beauty! This is the best.
Yeah, this is the top of the line of the top of the line.
Yeah.
You can't get better. That's why they call them a trunk. You know, for you car guys and you guys getting into the car realm, they call you well, throw your stuff in the trunk. Well, this has a trunk.
Actually has a
the
trunk.
It's a trunk.
Yeah.
You know, it's not part of the car anymore. It was the removable part of the
And
trunk.
it's got the rumble seat in it also.
Yeah, rumble seat. I mean, these are pretty tall. I'm about 6 foot, but they're pretty tall, long. I mean, if you're talking from back here to the trunk I mean, it's 20 feet.
Oh yeah.
So
you need a big garage for this one.
Yeah, but these Packards in here are just
Absolutely
something
gorgeous,
you really.
yeah.
I mean, you see Packards out at shows, you see Packards, you know, at some other places. These here at the Packard Museum are
The best of the
perfect.
best. Yep.
They're just beautiful, and there's some of every model you can ever want to see here.
Yep. Like that one we showed you before, that one-off. You know,
One
the
off.
Yep.
That one off we showed you is
Yeah.
just a gorgeous car.
Yeah. At the National Packard Museum today with Larry Ward. What a great place, Larry.
First of all, I can't thank Armstrong and both you and Greg for inviting the Two-Wheel Power Hour out here. The National Packard Museum is truly a gem in the valley. Packard automobiles were right here, built in Warren, Ohio. Just right down the road. And you know what? You can see all of the history of the Packards right here at the National Packard Museum. They're open 7 days a week except for like holidays and stuff. You know, we're very fortunate that we are allowed by iHeartMedia to continue to have the area's exclusive motorcycle show, and everybody that's on that show is connected in some way through motorcycling and through years and years. Roy Dykman, our touring and travel director, has 400,000 miles. Bob Wenzel, our off-road riding and competition reporter, was a professional racer. His son currently is a professional racer for Husqvarna. You look at road racing, we have Michael Marino. We call him our asphalt angel. He now works for the AMA, but Michael is our road racing reporter. We also have a restoration expert in Ted Guthrie. So there's something for everybody, Rick, on the motorcycle show, whether you're male or female, young or old, city or country, doesn't matter. We've got something for you. Tune in every Tuesday at 6 p.m.
6 to what? 7 on WKBN Radio 57 AM, right?
That's right, 570 WKBN, 6 p.m. Tuesday nights. Also, you can download the iHeartRadio app and go coast to coast with us, 570WKBN.com.
Sounds good, Larry. Larry, thank you very much for coming and doing
My
the
friend,
show today.
thank you.
It was a
I
pleasure
enjoyed
being
it.
here today, and thank you.
And I'd like to reciprocate and invite you on our show.
Okay.
Bring your camera crew and come on in, and we'll talk right before the car season begins. You can set the scene for us, and of course you do a huge car show with Armstrong each year that we're a part of. Like to have you on board, so let's make a date.
Thank you again, Larry.
Welcome.
Okay.